Thank you for joining us today on EdFile. Welcome to the program. I'm Ayola Kasim. The world is currently on the opposite track, heading for a 3 degrees Celsius rise, following the recent deadly flooding in several Western European countries. The World Meteorological Organization called for all nations to do more to hold back climate change-induced disasters. We're expected to cut our emissions and care for nature. With COVID-19 lockdowns, there are fears that countries will shun their climate pledges in order to save their economies. But Games organizers at the ongoing Beijing Winter Olympics said they are on track to produce a carbon-negative Olympics. We'll look at that and what they are doing there, as well as what happened in Japan. Do stay with us. From natural carbon dioxide refrigeration at ice rinks to 100% renewables-powered venues, China, the world's biggest polluter, is striving to show off its leadership in climate-friendly technology. For more than 2 months, hundreds of snow generators in the Beijing Olympics venues have been pumping out snow around the clock to create a winter wonderland on arid mountains. The Games, which kick off with an opening ceremony on Friday the 4th of February, will be the first Winter Olympics to use almost 100% artificial snow. One of the venues, Zhangjiakou, located nearly 200 kilometers northwest of the Chinese capital, receives relatively little natural snow, which, since Beijing was awarded the Games in 2015, has raised concerns among environmentalists about how much water is used to make it. Alpine skiing events take place at the National Alpine Ski Center at Yangqing in Beijing, which gets even less snow. Despite questions over the Games' sustainability due to the extensive use of artificial snow, Beijing says this is a green and even carbon-neutral Olympics.
This edition of the Games has clearly stated that they wanted the Games, sustainability to be at the heart of how they were preparing and hosting the Games. And you could see that it was really an opportunity for Beijing 22 to develop a certain number of standards or to use international standards in a systematic manner for the first time.
China, for the first time at an Olympics, is using the collected carbon dioxide from industrial waste gases to cool ice rinks in its 4 ice sports venues, replacing traditional hydrofluorocarbons that can damage the ozone layer. As the first city to host both Summer and Winter Games, Beijing also repurposed some of the venues built in 2008 to accommodate the needs of winter sports. For example, its iconic aquatic center, Water Cube, has been turned into Ice Cube for curling events. Meanwhile, all Games venues are fully powered by electricity from wind farms in the neighboring Hebei province through a 660 kilometers ultra-high voltage grid, while more than 800 hydrogen-fueled vehicles are deployed. Still, criticism over pollution, water usage, and the ecological sustainability of the Beijing Games has persisted, especially over the need for 100% artificial snowmaking, which puts pressure on regions with already strained water resources. Carmen de Jong, professor of hydrology at University of Strasbourg, said there has been a dangerous trend of moving the Winter Olympics toward dry countries with limited snow, requiring extensive carbon-intensive infrastructure.
Beijing is the worst of all candidates because it requires so much more water, and it's been destroying nature reserves just to create the alpine ski runs in order for them to be near to Beijing. It's very political. It all has to do with prestige. So building all the Olympic villages, removing local villages, building all these venues from scratch, and even making snow to cover the slopes to make them look white is the worst case scenario. So actually an artificial winter landscape is being created, which is of course extremely water consumptive in an area that is suffering under severe water scarcity.
The 25 Games venues, of which 13 were newly built, have also deployed energy-saving technologies, including low-carbon building materials such as recycled cement and smart snowmaking, which could use 20% less water than traditional technologies. The Games will not put additional pressure on local water supplies and rely instead on systems that collected mountain runoff and rainfall during the summer, in line with China's wider efforts to create a circular economy in which resources are fully utilized and recycled. The Beijing Winter Olympics Committee said in a pre-Games report in January that about 158,300 tons of emissions have been saved via deployment of low-carbon energy and venues. Total greenhouse gas emissions could reach 1.028 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent throughout the preparation and post-Games in 2016 to 2022, comparing to about 1.6 million tons at the Pyeongchang Games in 2018. Most of that reduction comes from the absence of overseas spectators at the Beijing Games due to China's zero-COVID protocols. The lower number of international flights remain 512,000 tons of carbon dioxide emissions less than earlier projections. A detailed sustainability report is expected to be released after the Games end.
Artificial snow-making mechanism is in line with the sustainable requirements. We use water from surface runoff, rainfall to create the snow, and the machines to make snow are using the most advanced system. We have fully considered the needs of snow tracks located in the venues in Zhangjiakou and Yanqing, which meets the requirements of international standards.
Citing a carbon credit program collaborating with state energy firms and the government of hosting cities, the Director of Sustainability for the Beijing Organizing Committee for the Olympic Games says she is quite confident credits received so far could offset output.
Our greenhouse gas emission baseline was calculated at 1.306 million tons of CO2. The calculation is the maximum possible emission, but we think the actual figure won't be more than 1.306 million tons, so I am still quite confident to say that this can be a carbon-negative Olympics.
China needs to beef up its measurement of carbon emissions in line with its monitoring of air pollutants to meet a pledge by President Xi Jinping to become carbon neutral by around 2060.
Let's not be naive. Artificial snow is used in a consistent way for decades, in winter competitive sport. It's also very widely used for leisure winter sport, as we know, as we practice winter sport ourselves. So here at the Winter Olympic Games, it's no exception. What is really important, like for any other activities that we practice, is to try to do it in the most efficient way. And this is what I believe Beijing 2022 is trying to achieve.
Critics warned in 2015, when China won its bid, that the Winter Olympics could be overshadowed by hazardous smog in a region dominated by heavy industry. President Xi subsequently vowed to run a Green Games, and Hebei promised to transform and upgrade its industrial economy. Since then, China has planted thousands of hectares of trees in Beijing and surrounding Hebei province, built sprawling wind and solar farms, and relocated hundreds of enterprises.
And I think the dangerous trend is also to move into venues that have virtually no snow. They don't have the primary product that the Olympics rely on, and there are less and less candidates from Alpine and Scandinavian and so on venues, and it's moving, the trend is going towards very dry countries, and building all that infrastructure every 4 years from scratch. So each time they will be releasing huge amounts of CO2 for creating all these new venues and infrastructure. I think that is a thing to worry about.
The Winter Olympics has provided opportunities for the world to unite and address some of the shared global challenges, such as climate change and the inequalities brought by the COVID-19 pandemic. The game gathered about 170 official representatives from nearly 70 countries and international organizations, including more than 30 heads of state and government, important royal family members, and heads of international organizations. The big event is sending a message to call on the international community to unite and keep solidarity, says the United Nations Secretary General.
It is an opportunity to see people coming from all over the world and with a strong message of unity and solidarity, explaining that we are only one humanity and we have only one planet. Exactly this message of unity. I mean, the world has been divided. Look, the virus has defeated the international community. We were not able to come together to defeat the virus.
He points out that some countries are still struggling in the battle with the pandemic and lack of resources to recover, which aggravated the world imbalance.
Even today in Africa, only probably 10% of the population is vaccinated. In my country, 90% of the population was vaccinated. On the other hand, if one looks at the resources available for recovery, you have countries that have the capacity to print trillions, and you have developing countries in a very, very difficult situation. They are with a huge debt. They have no financial resources. They cannot fight the COVID. They have no vaccines. Some of them, they cannot fight the COVID and relaunch the economy and create jobs and improve the living conditions of their population. So the world became much more unequal. Inequalities are growing tremendously.
However, he says, the sporting event and the spirit of Olympics reminds the international community that we can overcome these difficulties as long as people around the world work together.
And so these Olympic Games are exactly the moment in which we remind people we cannot defeat the COVID country by country. We need to come together, as in the Games. We cannot defeat climate change country by country. We need to come together, as in the Games. And we cannot create justice and equality in the world if you don't simultaneously compete, but also live together and enjoy this unity as it is possible in the Olympic Games. And I hope that this message will be understood, and I hope that these Games will contribute to a better world.
President Xi Jinping has championed China's drive of getting 300 million people involved in winter sports. And the United Nations Secretary General says this Olympics truly attracted more people, not only Olympians, but also ordinary people to enjoy winter sports.
I mean, you have the athletes, but you have everybody that will be seeing, that will be living, that will be feeling the Olympic Games. And this becomes a world event. It's not only an event here in Beijing, it's a world event. And it's something that makes people enthusiastic everywhere, seeing their athletes, seeing their heroes, seeing the people they appreciate.
The Tokyo Games from July the 23rd to August 8th coincide with the year's hottest weather in Tokyo, where the temperature can spike to 35 degrees Celsius or more. Organizers deployed a host of tools from mist spraying stations to cooling vests to beat the heat while handing out salt tablets and ice creams to volunteers. Tokyo has also used roads that reflect heat or pavement that absorb water to stay cool, and the organizers moved the marathon and race walk to the cooler northern city of Sapporo. As competitors battled for the podium on the third day of Olympic athletics on Sunday the 1st of August, it was Tokyo's stunning heat that perhaps dished out the most pain. After the threat of a typhoon and rain-disrupted competition earlier in the Olympics, Tokyo's searing summer heat returned with a vengeance on day 8 of the Games.
I mean, we're used to hot weather, but not to this level. Not just because it's hot, it's also because it's humid, and you tend to lose a lot of, sweat. And then the athletes are going to get dehydrated, but we're trying to work on that.
Punishing conditions greeted the athletes as a trackside thermometer in the open, placed about 50 meters from the finish line, touched 40 degrees Celsius and the humidity hovered around 60%, with some beating down on the fan-free Olympic Stadium. The risks of heat stroke at one of the hottest games on record are borne by the athletes, but also by the thousands of staff, especially at outdoor venues. Director General for the Games, Toshiro Muto, said 30 people involved in the organization of the global sports showpiece, including volunteers and contractors, suffered heat stroke, but all had mild symptoms. Despite the climate setback, Japan put a spotlight on sustainability at the 2020 Olympic Games. Electric cars ferry competitors and media between venues, many of which were temporary constructions made of recycled wood dismantled after the Games, preventing the white elephant stadiums left behind in other host cities. Sustainable doesn't necessarily mean high-tech. However, the design of the Japan's Olympic Stadium incorporated traditional giant eaves to allow cooling breezes to circulate freely.
Our medal project, in which we engage the population of Japan to donate their used electronic devices so that we could extract the metals from them, smelt them, and then use them to become the medals that we awarded to the athletes in the awards ceremonies. Another example we have is the Recycled Plastic Podium project. So we collected recycled plastic waste equivalent to about 400,000 laundry detergent bottles from members of the public, donated by members of the public, as well as collected ocean plastic waste to create about 98 podiums to be used during the Games at the victory ceremonies.
The event has some high-profile green credentials. The gold, silver and bronze medals were forged from recycled metal, using old mobile phones and other small appliances donated by the general public in an initiative started back in 2017.
We were able to collect enough credits to offset and actually go beyond carbon neutrality for the amount of emissions that the Tokyo 2020 Games have generated. One other big thing, of course, is our hydrogen project, in which we've embraced hydrogen energy in a variety of different ways. Perhaps most notably is with 500 fuel cell vehicles which have been provided by our Olympic partner Toyota, as well as using hydrogen to fuel the Olympic cauldron, both in the Olympic Stadium and at Yume no Ohashi Bridge, as well as in part of the Olympic Village.
Among the 43 venues for Olympics and Paralympics Games, 25 existed before the Games and 10 are temporary venues. The Games will, however, rely on a carbon offset program to reach negative carbon output. The organizing committee estimated the event will generate 2.73 million tons of carbon. The carbon offset program, in which more than 200 Japanese businesses are estimated to donate carbon credit of around 4.38 tons to the Games from July 2018 to September 2020, will tip the event into the black.
So sustainability since 2015 is at the very heart of all the discussions we have with future hosts. So this is true already for the edition of the Games which are being organized. But it will be even more the case in the future as we continue to set the bar high. You have also to know that we set the ambition because we have included this, obviously climate action as well as sourcing and the necessity to use as much as possible permanent venues in the requirements of the OCT contract.
Some 500 hydrogen fuel cell vehicles were used to transport competitors, officials and media, as well as light the Olympic cauldron. The Athletes' Village, where competitors sleep on cardboard beds, becomes an apartment complex after the Games and continues to be partially powered by hydrogen fuel cells. Among the 43 venues for Olympics and Paralympics Games, 25 existed before the Games and 10 were temporary venues. Tokyo 2020 published its post-Games sustainability report, which highlights the Games' achievements in the areas of climate, circular economy and promotion of a sustainable society. The report was released during the Tokyo 2020 Executive Board meeting that took place in Tokyo, in Japan. Key highlights from the report include going beyond carbon neutrality by reducing carbon emissions and compensating more than the remaining emissions, reusing or recycling 99% of non-consumable items procured for the Games, recycling 62% of the waste generated during the Games, and achieving an all-time high of 48% female athlete participation in the Games. Sustainability measures generally declined over 16 summer and winter games held between 1992 and 2020, according to an analysis published in the journal Nature Sustainability in April. Salt Lake City in 2002 ranked the best, while the 2016 Rio de Janeiro Olympics and the 2014 Winter Games in Sochi ranked at the bottom.
What we have seen is now everybody is much more aware that everybody has a role to play in climate action. I think this is the main difference, maybe, if you look back a few years ago. And we also have more innovative solutions at hand, like some of those that are showcased here, like hydrogen.
The WWF has called for improvements to the way organizers procured wood, paper, marine products, and palm oil for use at the Games, saying the process for Tokyo could deeply affect forest and marine conservation in and outside Japan.
For the procurement policy, at least it has informed the Japanese companies how to ensure sustainability. Because when you just say sustainability or SDGs, people don't know how to comply with these sustainability rules. And just, seeing SDGs is not enough. Just maybe images is not enough. So how to achieve this sustainability goal? You have to follow these principles for each product. That role model, maybe this Tokyo Olympic played the role of informing the Japanese people.
Experts have said many of the challenges facing humankind, such as climate change, water scarcity, inequality, and hunger, can only be resolved at the global level and by promoting sustainable development, a commitment to social progress, environmental balance, and economic growth. As a part of a new Sustainable Development Roadmap, the United Nations approved the 2030 Agenda, which contains the Sustainable Development Goals, a call to action to protect the planet and guarantee the global well-being of people. These common goals require the active involvement of businesses, administrations, and countries, as well as individuals around the world. When it comes to living more sustainably, we've been told it's not big companies or governments leading the charge. It's individuals and families making their own rules and making change at the grassroots level. We hope you do your part. That's our show for the week. Be sure to join us next week. From all of us here in Lagos, it's bye for now.